Hey y'all, welcome to or welcome back to our very bookish channel. And in today's video, y'all, we are doing our last Halloween challenge. This is Halloween challenge part 3. My husband picked the prompts for our challenge, and in this video, we are going to be reading a book based on a horror classic. So for me, this was a very hard book to find. I had a hard time picking a book that I wanted to read. I found a lot of retellings of Edgar Allan Poe, his horror short stories, but I don't know, I just didn't seem like interesting to me. They were all really short. I mean, he mostly wrote short stories, so all the retellings were fairly short too, and I just wanted to read something a little bigger. I don't really typically enjoy the short stories as much in the shorter books, so I had a hard time with that. But I did settle on a book that I think is going to be a good one. Now, this book is based off of Macbeth, which is a Shakespeare play. And okay, listen, I know, okay, Macbeth in itself might not be categorized as a horror, okay, but that is a very, very dark tale. I have not read the play Macbeth. I do know, though, that it is about a man named Macbeth that has to kill to gain power, and then to keep power he has to keep killing. So I know there's gonna be a lot of murder in there, okay, which is, you know, arguably a keystone in a horror novel. So and the book I've picked is also very, very dark, very horror-esque, okay. I'm gonna read Macbeth by Joe Nesbø. Now, I'm really excited to get into this. Joe Nesbø is, I think he's Norwegian. I think he's a Norwegian author, and he has a very popular mystery series called the Harry Holy series, and Harry Holy is a detective, and they're very dark, very gruesome murders, very difficult crimes to solve, just very gritty novels. I have read the first installment of that series called The Bat, and I have seen a movie called The Snowman, which is based on a book in that series. So this is going to be a very dark book, I'm anticipating. He's a very dark author. Okay, so what is this book about? Based on the description, this book takes place in like the 1920s, I believe. 1970s. Wow, I was way off. This takes place in 1970s, and it's in this sort of rundown, very dilapidated city, and this city is run over by criminals. The high-ranking politicians are criminals and crooked and paid off. There's a drug lord named Hecate that is running the town, and then there's Macbeth, who I believe is the head of SWAT. We will see. We'll see where this book goes. Like I said, I don't know much about the Shakespeare play, but I am really excited to get into this because I have read and enjoyed this author before. So I'm going to get started, and I will be back with an update.
We are on to our last challenge for Halloween, and it's possible we don't get this up before Halloween. It'll probably be after, especially since the book I'm about to show you is a tad longer than what I'm used to reading. It may take me a little longer. For this one, we are reading a book that is a retelling of a horror classic. And at first, I didn't really know what I was going to read. I have been wanting to read Stephen King for a long time, but I didn't have him in mind when we originally had this prompt, because I didn't honestly really know that he had a horror retelling. So when I was looking up books, something that popped up in the result was that Salem's Lot by Stephen King is a retelling of Dracula. And I knew this one was about vampires, but I didn't think it was literally a retelling of Dracula. And the more I looked into it, I realized it was because Stephen King was inspired by Dracula for this. It was one of his favorite books when he was younger. He said it really left an indelible impression on him. But his wife is what inspired him to write this, because he was studying in school and he was talking about Dracula, saying like what would happen if Dracula were alive today. She ended up saying that it would be really interesting to put Dracula in a rural setting. And they're infamously in Maine. They live in Maine, Bangor, Maine. And he has a lot of his books take place in rural Maine. He decided to write, thanks to his wife, he decided to write Salem's Lot. And there was another quote that he actually described this as Peyton Place meets Dracula. And Peyton Place, I believe, was a TV show. I don't think it was a movie, but it was a really popular TV show that was like a soap opera almost, a drama. Typically, I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of vampire novels or movies. They aren't something that I'm drawn to. I never finished Twilight. I started the first one, and I'm one of the probably rare few who didn't really like it, didn't finish it. I can't even think of anything else that I have even read. The closest is I'm a huge fan of the TV show Supernatural, and they've had vampires on there several times. So that's probably the closest to anything that I've enjoyed with vampires in it. I don't know how this one's gonna go because it's not like I'm a huge fan of vampires, but I've been wanting to read especially the well-known Stephen King books. I've read one Stephen King, and it's not even a horror. It's The Eye of the Dragon, which is kind of his only, well, at the time, it was his only, when I read it, it was his only book that wasn't a horror novel. I would say it was more like fantasy, sort of. I would say that's the closest genre to put that in, but I did enjoy it. I really liked his writing. So I think I'm going to enjoy it for his writing. He gets rave reviews. People get fanatical about Stephen King. Let's see if he lives up to all of the hype. And I have read through the prologue. Right after the prologue, I thought this was a good sign. There is a quote from Shirley Jackson and The Haunting of Hill House, but it's a long quote, so I'm not going to read it to you. Well, I am a huge fan of Shirley Jackson, especially I reread Haunting of Hill House this year. So very good sign. I am going to do some more reading and then I will be back with some thoughts.
Hey y'all, I have a reading update for you guys. I got to chapter 5, which is page like 60-ish. The chapters in here are kind of long, but there is some spaces, like there are stopping points within the chapters where you can stop. So the chapters are long, which I know some people don't like. I prefer shorter chapters, but I don't really mind it, especially if there's like breaks in between, because I can stop in the middle of a chapter if I have to. Anyways, so the beginning of this book, like the first chapter, was a little rough and slow starting because you're kind of thrown right into this scene where there is a drug bust going down, and there are police officers, law enforcement around, and it's kind of jarring because there are a lot of characters and they're all in law enforcement, and I personally am not really familiar with the hierarchy of law enforcement, like who's above who, like chief investigator and head of the narco unit and, you know, head of homicide. Like, I don't know the rankings and all of that. So trying to keep the characters straight was a little bit of a struggle for me at first. So I actually reread the first chapter a couple of times just to try to make sure I understand what's going on. The setting of this book is pretty cool. I think the cover kind of describes it perfectly. It's a very dark city. The way the city's described, I kind of envision it like the city from the movie The Crow. If you've ever seen The Crow, it's a horror film, and the city's always dark and there's always criminals everywhere, or it's really rainy and it's just a dangerous place to live. That is this city. It's been abandoned. The main employers in the city have gone under, and there's like this chemical soot thing that kind of harbors over the city, and it's just a very dirty, murky city full of criminals. And you've got Hecate, I think that's how you say it, which I know is a Greek god, and I think that name was chosen on purpose. But you have Hecate, who is a major drug lord in the city, a very high ranking, the top probably drug lord in the city. And it's ironic because I looked up Hecate, and Hecate is a goddess in the Greek mythology, and she is associated with a lot of things, and drugs is one of them. So I don't have any idea if that's in Macbeth, the Shakespeare play, or not. But then you have a police officer named Duff, and he is trying to take out Hecate. And then you have Macbeth, and Macbeth is the head of SWAT, and he's kind of watching from the sidelines, watching in the background how Duff handles the takedown of this narcotics gang. So there's a lot to process in the beginning, and then once everything is said and done, and you know the whole thing has played out, you're kind of get back, you kind of step back, and you get you kind of get the story of the situation told from each person's point of view. So Duff kind of talks about it from his point of view and what happened, and then Macbeth talks about it from his point of view and what happened. So I don't know, it was just a little hard to get into, but I've started to get the hang of the book. I've started to get all of the characters straight, and it's really sucked me in. It is turning out to be a very good book. It is very complicated. It's not a book you can sleep on or just kind of lazily read or gloss over things while you're reading. You really have to focus on this book and pay attention to names and places and details. So that's the kind of book this is, and I'm really liking it now that I've really got a good grip on the characters and what's going on. So I am currently at Panera. I am going to eat lunch. I need to upload some vlogs for you guys. So we have the Halloween Challenge Part 2 I'm uploading today, and we also have our most anticipated for November and December, which is going to be scheduled to upload tomorrow. So if you all haven't checked out those videos, feel free to do so. I'll link them in the comments below, but I'm going to go here and upload that, and then I have a couple of hours where I can sit and read. So hopefully I'm going to get a lot of reading done on this book. It is 440-ish pages long, so I got a lot of reading to do, and it's getting to be the end of the month, so I'm really trying to get this done before Halloween. So yeah, I gotta get to it. So I will update you once I've read more of the book. Y'all, it is really windy out there, and I am currently on chapter 14, which is page around 160-ish. So I got a huge chunk of reading done, and I'm just really immersed in this book and this world. I am loving it. I'm loving how dark it is. I'm loving how complicated everything is, just all of the characters. And Macbeth actually has a woman named Lady, and I'm pretty sure, almost certain, there's a thing like Lady Macbeth or something. I'm pretty sure in the Macbeth Shakespeare play that's his woman. So Macbeth in this book does have a woman named Lady. So she is kind of and this may be true in the play as well, but she's kind of a bad influence on him. Like, she's kind of corrupting him a little bit. She's kind of pushing him to do things that is not necessarily something he would think of to do on his own. She's putting ideas and thoughts in his head. So he's starting to go down this slippery slope here of, doing immoral things. So that's where we're at, and I'm just really loving this book. I I kind of want to take my time with this book. I'm up on a little bit of a deadline to get this done before Halloween, but at the same time, I really want to take my time and not rush this book and really absorb everything that I can, because this story unfolding has been so kind of shocking at some points, but just so good and very complicated. And I love all of the politicking going on between all of these people and all of the characters in this book. So that's where I'm at right now, and I will be back with some more updates when they come.
Earlier today, I had to go check out the Ollie's bargain outlet near me because I saw a few TikToks that talked about and did show that they had like a huge area for books. I haven't been to an Ollie's in a really long time. I had wanted to know what it was at some point when I saw one, and I ended up checking it out, but I didn't even realize there was one close to me because it's kind of hidden where it is. And after I saw this TikTok, there was actually a couple, I Googled to see if there was one near me, and I was surprised because I didn't realize there was one as close as it was to me. Had to go check it out, and it did have a lot of books. I also happened, because it's fall, I had seen a lot of, I just love the fall leaves and the colors of the trees. Living in Ohio and PA in my life, I'm always used to the turning of the seasons, and I just love it. There's something just so beautiful about it. I took some footage. I'm gonna show you some fall footage that I had taken, as well as some footage for Ollie's, but I'm going to show you my haul right after that. So I got 4 books and I was pretty impressed with what they had. I am most definitely going to be going back and checking maybe monthly to see any new books that they have. I don't know how often they change it. The TikToks that I had seen didn't really mention that part. They had just discovered it, that this was a thing. So the 4 books that I got Paula Hawkins, A Slow Fire Burning. I recently just read her newest, The Blue Hour, and Amanda can tag the link for my ARC review for that. I really enjoyed that one. It's out right now and it's actually doing really well. There's a lot of buzz on it. And I loved Girl on the Train, even though the character in there was very much an unreliable narrator, so there was some frustration, but it ended very well. And after I read The Blue Hour and saw how much I loved that one, I figured I needed to buy another one, especially when I found it there. It's only $4.99, so the books are really cheap. I'll tell you how much each one is. But I thought that was a good find, so I grabbed that one. I haven't read Megan Miranda yet, and she does a lot of thrillers. And I don't know much about this one, but when I saw it, I figured, hey, why not? This one is also $4.99, which I thought was a really good price. So I picked that one up. And though Ruth Ware, I can't say I have been much of a fan, but they had her latest one there, which is 0 Days. Well, I should say latest one. I think there was one after this, but this was her last one before her newest one. And this one was also $4.99. I thought I would just pick that one up. And the last one sounded so interesting. And I have seen the name Alifair Burke on a couple of my thrillers where Alifair Burke had given like a little blurb about loving the book. I knew that she had written mysteries, but I have yet to read one. This one sounded so interesting. It's about someone who has amnesia from an accident, doesn't remember. They thought it would be temporary, but she doesn't regain any of her memory. And she ends up just creating this new life in this new town. There's a woman she ends up being best friends with, and all of a sudden this woman disappears and there's just a drop of blood. So she has to kind of figure out what's going on, what was the past of this woman. So I thought that one was really interesting and I picked that one up. And this one is only $3.99. They had, as you saw, a ton of books. There was like cookbooks, fiction, tons of kids books, all kinds of things. I'm definitely going to be going back. And also now for an update. I haven't had the most time to read, which is frustrating, especially when you have a longer book. So I have decided to do both audio and reading for this. I've been listening to it on Audible, actually liking the narration, and so that's a bonus. Sometimes I'm not always a fan of the narrator, and I'm not a big audio person, so I was happy when I liked the narrator for this. I am just finishing chapter 5. I am very much enjoying it. I love his writing, and it is a slower burn of a novel. I did see a quote, I think it was in the beginning of this edition, because they had some, maybe it wasn't this one, because I'm not seeing the little blurbs that I thought I saw in this one, but I did see somewhere that this was a slower burn of a novel and that it hits a peak towards like 2/3 in and then it just explodes pretty much. I am looking forward to that. I'm also enjoying getting to know the characters. Ben Mears has returned to, and I didn't even realize till I read it that it was actually Jerusalem's Lot, and they call it Salem's Lot for short. It was something I never had known, at least if I'd known that, I hadn't really paid attention to it. So Ben Mears had been in this town when he was around 8, and he saw some disturbing things in this house. I think that's why there was a quote from Shirley Jackson with the Hill House, The Haunting of Hill House, because the Marston house is kind of the same symbol. I especially love how they use the house as a symbol in the Netflix version of The Haunting of Hill House. It was such a great adaptation, and it wasn't even just based on the book. It was inspired, and it had its own story and its own spin on the whole thing, but I absolutely loved it. Anyway, So Ben Mears is back in town, and at the same time, the Marston house, which he was kind of traumatized as a kid seeing something with a ghost, the Marston house, and he kind of inquired to see if anyone was renting it, but it is being rented. It's being rented by seemingly two people that are doing something with antiquing. And they're kind of talked to like, is this really what you want to do here? There's not really the customer that you're looking for, but they just seem kind of suspicious. So at the same time this happened, there is a disappearance, and there starts to be some disappearances of people from this town. And one of the little boys, a little Glick boy, has disappeared, and his brother, and something happens with his brother as well. Ben Mears ends up romantically involved with Susan Norton, and so that story's in the background as well. And Ben Mears is writing a book, and at first he won't tell people what it's about, but in the chapter I'm writing, he kind of tells there's a scene between him and Susan that I just absolutely loved. It made me love this book, and it's almost 200 pages in, but I loved all the pages in here with Ben and Susan and their dialogue so much. It just made me fall in love with this book. So that's the update. I am loving it. Nothing really with vampires has happened yet. You're seeing kind of like flashes of things, but I wouldn't say there's some big, huge scene yet. No big battle, no big scene with vampires yet. But you're getting some hints that things are happening behind the scenes and things are connecting the dots. But I will give you guys another update in another 100 or 200 pages, unless something big happens, and then I'll let you guys know. But it doesn't sound like that's happening until closer towards the end. It's very much slowly building. You're finding out all the players and what's happening and building the suspense for, I'm sure, something big. I will be back with more thoughts.
Okay, so I was at the park reading. I got about another 50 pages in. I am almost to chapter 22, but I was sitting there reading, enjoying some of the comfortable weather outside, and it has been windy all day, but then all of a sudden it started raining, and I had to like stop my reading and come get in my car. I am going to be going home, and I can't wait to finish reading. Lady has just done something, and the section of the book where it's following her and you're following what she's done ended, and you did not find out the consequence, if any, of her actions of what she did. So I'm like dying to get back home and start reading till I get to her part again to find out what's gonna happen to Lady, like what her fate is. So yeah, that's all I've got for now, but I will update you all again in a little bit.
Literally right after that was I don't know if you guys can hear my washer, but I'm doing some laundry and it's kind of loud. Anyway, right after that, there are scenes very much around some vampire people are turning into vampires. But then I didn't realize this. I didn't notice in the beginning so much, but it is in parts, and it says part 2, the Emperor of Ice Cream. I'm not sure what that means, but I guess I'm about to find out. But yes, a lot more vampire things are happening. I'll be back. I'm still in part 2, the Emperor of Ice Cream, and things are definitely escalating. And there's a part just now that just makes you so uneasy, where Susan is at the Marston house. It says, and she knew someone was behind her even before the hand fell on her shoulder, because she's trying to creep up to this house. And that feeling. Okay, I just want to scream. I just want to say, do you ever have that moment in books where you just want to scream and you can't believe what's happening? And I would just want to scream, no, that's happening. I didn't necessarily think this was going to have like a happy ending, but I didn't want that to happen. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but that sucks. So I don't know what's going to happen now. Or yeah, I'm trying to watch what I say, because I can't say what happened. I'm just gonna dig back in.
Guys, it is Saturday, one of my favorite days during fall, because college football. I love college football. I know I mentioned that before, but it's just one of my favorite, most cozy days. I can relax and watch college football and read books during commercials and things and while games are going on. So I'm just really excited. I am currently on chapter 36 and I only have about this much more to go. So I'm on page 364 and I have until page 446. So we probably 80-ish pages to go, and I'm definitely gonna finish today. I cannot wait to get to the end of this book and find out the fates of all of these characters. I just have really had such a great time. I know the ending's probably gonna be tragic, and I can't wait to see how these characters go out in a blaze of glory. And I will probably update y'all tomorrow morning. I feel like this is probably a book I'm gonna have to sit on and think about for a little bit before I do any updating. So I'm gonna finish reading, watch football, hang out today, and then update y'all tomorrow.
I had a large chunk of time with the audiobook because I had to drive to Kentucky for work. And so I got through a huge amount in the book. A lot of it has to do with them not believing what they're really seeing with the vampires that are being unveiled, and they are talking amongst themselves as to, could this really be true? How do we test this? What do we do? And I just started part 3, which is, I mean, I don't have too much more left, but it's called The Deserted Village. And there's a quote from Poe, which I love at the beginning, but I only got a little bit in and I had to stop and record because I've been very invested in this story. I just feel like Stephen King is a really great writer. And I mean, that sounds like a duh, because those who have already read him, I'm sure, realize this. And obviously he wouldn't be as popular as he was with as many books as he has if he wasn't a good writer. I just love how he describes things. And even the beginning of this, where it's talking about Salem's Lot, he describes something out of the Old Farmer's Almanac. But the way he says this next part kind of just caught my attention. And it says, no one pronounced Jerusalem's lot dead on the morning of October 6th. No one knew it was. Like the bodies of previous days, it retained every semblance of life. And now I feel like we're going into final battle, the final, whatever's going to happen with these vampires. Ben and Mark, they're all going to have to confront, I guess, the vampires. So I'm going to get back to it and I'll let you guys know what happens.
All right, guys, I have finished Macbeth by Joe Nesbo. I finished it yesterday. And oh my gosh, is this book disturbing? I mean, they're like anything that disturbs you, just any concept that is disturbing to you is probably in this book. I'm just gonna let you know. I really didn't expect anything less. Like I said, I've read this author before. I know he's very dark and gritty, and I love it. I just love, I mean, there's just, it's not always, okay, I can't always read just dark, gritty, gross books. And it's not gross, like very gory or like body gore or anything like that. It's just very, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning, when I was reading it, I kept picturing the city of the crow. So just those vibes, okay? So I can't always read books like that, but there's just sometimes, especially like Halloween, dark, spooky season, sometimes you just need like, you know, a dark book. So I really, really enjoyed it. This kind of makes me want to get back into reading his Harry Holy series, starting with book 2, since I already read book 1. I'm not sure what booktube is. I can't think of it. But anyways, I was thinking about maybe this is inspiring me to start picking up that series again because this was just a fantastic book. When I went on Goodreads to update my status on Goodreads for this book, I noticed that this book does not have a very good rating, and I'm just very curious why. It has under a 4. It has a 3 something. And I'm just wondering how. How does this book have like a lowish rating? I wouldn't say it's low, but it's low-ish. And I don't know. I'm giving it a 4 on Goodreads. If Goodreads did half rankings, I would do 4.5 for sure. It wasn't quite a 5, but I just really enjoyed my time with this book. I really enjoyed watching these characters more or less destroy themselves. I just found the writing very good, very thorough. Everything gets wrapped up and summed up very neatly at the end. And I don't know about similarities between the play Macbeth and this book, but I know I caught a lot of things that I suspect are very similar. Like I mentioned before, Macbeth does have a woman. Her name's Lady. And Lady, y'all, Lady, she is a dark, dark, dark character. She has a horrific past and is just very dark. I was actually surprised with her character. So I don't know. I think if you're in the mood for a dark book, a sort of, I mean, Shakespeare, I guess, was known for his tragedies. So this is, I guess, a tragedy. And if that's something you're in the mood for, I would highly recommend this book. It is kind of a longer read. It is 446 pages. So this isn't a book that you're just going to sit down, read in one sitting and fly through just nonchalantly. This is like a book that really takes a lot of focus and attention. But if that's something that you're in the mood for, then I would say definitely go out and pick this book up.
All right, I finished my first Stephen King horror book, and I very, very much enjoyed it. I am definitely going back for more with Stephen King. I really, really want to read The Stand is, I think, the next one. I keep getting told that I should read Pet Sematary. I also want to read The Shining. I mean, there's a bunch. And the reason why I had picked this one was because this vlog, we were doing a classic horror retelling. Since I didn't read the actual book for Dracula, I'm not sure how much there's like references or anything to it. Obviously, I've seen a lot of those old movies that had Dracula in it, and obviously Dracula's been in our culture forever, so I know references to Dracula. If I had more time, I would have read Dracula, but I have so much on my TBR. I didn't even get to Frankenstein, which I wanted to do in October. So unfortunately, I couldn't put this off anymore. It's already after Halloween as it is, and I wanted to make sure that I get this finished for our vlog. I thought with the subject of vampires, I may not like it because, and then I remembered during reading this that I very much loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I was in college. I was obsessed with that show. So I laughed at one point when I realized that. But as I said earlier, I didn't read Twilight. I don't feel like I'm drawn to books with vampires in it. I mostly wanted to read a Stephen King book because I've heard so many good things about him. And though to me, this book, I didn't feel like I was terrified. I don't feel like that, at least this particular book by him. I mean, it definitely was creepy. There were many creepy moments. You saw the part where when Susan was going up to the Marsden house, that gave me a lot of like, oh God, what's going to happen? And definitely, I would say the second half of this book felt very tense and what's going to happen next. And obviously I can't talk about the things that did happen that I wasn't really I really didn't want to happen. But then realizing that this isn't like, obviously this was not going to have a cutesy bow happy ending. I really did like the ending a lot. He ended it in a very interesting way. Also leaving it, I feel like it left it kind of open, but I don't want to talk too much and ruin and give spoilers or anything. Like I said, what mostly I felt propelled this book for me and made me so interested was just how he writes. how he writes the characters, how he writes from so many different angles. There were a lot of characters, but it didn't feel overwhelming or confusing. And though I didn't see Paint and Place, I can see why there was like a comparison. And they even mentioned Paint and Place in this, because that was a very popular show back, I want to say it's the 60s and 70s. But that felt like that drama, soap opera, all these characters are intermingling. And, you know, between Ben being involved with Susan, and then she has like an ex-boyfriend, and how that all the characters, like the mothers and the dads of the characters, like how it all intermingles. I just liked how he had everyone connected and how their stories moved forward with what was happening as these interlopers move into town. I did get a chance to be in Bangor, Maine. I was visiting my friend Sarah back in, I want to say 2016. It was at the time that it was remade into a movie, and Stephen King someone had tied a red balloon on the gate outside his house. And he's known around there, and my friend Sarah is a huge fan, but he's known around there to just go shopping. I don't know if he still does that, but this was back in 2016. We had a chance to be outside of his house, and we took a picture with the balloon was on the outside with the house in the background. And then we saw it. I want to say it was part 2, but it could have been part 1. I can't remember now. But we saw it in a drive-in theater in Bangor, Maine. It was like the ultimate experience for seeing Stephen King. But my friend Sarah had read the book, and I hadn't read the book. And she was mentioning like all the different things in the book that they don't necessarily put in the movies because it's so crazy. And she told me what it was, and I was just like, oh, it made me not want to read that book. Obviously, there's a lot more to explore with Stephen King. I really am drawn to his book, The Stand. I've always wanted to read it. I do own a copy of it, so I really want to read that one at some point. I don't know if it's going to be by the end of this year, but I am definitely going to have it within the next year. I think it's definitely going to be one I want to read. Thanks for watching as we read a book that was based on a classic horror. I'm not sure I know what Amanda has read, so I'm curious to see what she has read and her thoughts on that. If you haven't seen our other 2 Halloween challenge videos, we do have 2 other ones out. We're not going to have as much content going into the rest of this year. We're going to be doing more like mood reading and doing just a couple vlogs. There's a lot of things I'm looking forward to reading so much, and I am in the middle of 2 right now that I am enjoying very much. So I want to get back to that. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time.